Hey guys, how you doing, man? So I just wanted to cover something that's totally off topic for my usual videos, but I come at this from 2+ decades in the field of search and rescue, and coordinating multiple agencies and assets and responses to major events. I did it for a long time, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. I also wanted to say that I feel my thoughts go out to the families of those missing, the 5 people on board. You have British businessman of Dubai, Hamish Harding, famous French diver Paul-Henri Marjolais, Pakistan's richest man, Shahzada Dawood, and his 19-year-old son. And then you have the CEO of OceanGate, Stockton Rush, man. He was on board. So there's 5 souls on board. So they claim one of them's the pilot and the other 4 are mission specialists. Now, in an event like this, everybody does have a job. I think they get this fancy name just so they feel important, mission specialist, but everybody does have a job when it comes to damage control and casualty response. So I'm sure they knew what they were doing, or they had to do something. I also wanted to say, for the first responders, thank you. I know that you guys are working tirelessly too. So let's do the background. On Sunday, 18th of June, the OceanGate, a company that operates the submersible, Titan. The Titan was deployed from the Canadian icebreaker Polar Prince. It went down and a 3-hour descent to the Titanic, and 1 hour 45 minutes into the descent they lost comms, man. No communication. So off grid, man. The sub disappeared. 9 hours later they contacted Coast Guard 1st District Boston and said, we got an overdue submarine, submersible. So Coast Guard responded, and they responded with what they had and given the limitations of what they could do. So they dispatched air assets and surface vessels to try to look for the sub in the hopes that it was bobbing on the surface. Now this vessel, the Titan, had 7 built-in redundancies to bring it to the surface in an event that it was on the bottom. But that's assuming it was still intact on the bottom and it could just blow the tubes and just go to the top. That's assuming it didn't suffer a catastrophic leak and implode. So the Coast Guard was, did a search size of Connecticut, using their C-130s. Coast Guard, Canadian Coast Guard operated a P-3 Orion, and all the ships in the area did grid patterns looking for this submarine. It was not found, which means the thing was still underwater, and that's where the Coast Guard's response ended. That's where it stopped. The Coast Guard is not equipped to handle underwater rescue, and actually no agency really is. And that was the problem with this case from the beginning. There's not anything we can do about it. The Coast Guard, the captain at the 1st District, Captain Jamie Frederick, a very good man, somebody I worked alongside with for years, he said he really danced around the issue of what would they do even if they found it.
If your submersibles can find this sub, is there any way to retrieve it and save the people on board?
Yeah, so right now all of our efforts are focused on finding the sub. What I will tell you is we have a group of our nation's best experts in the Unified Command, and if we get to that point, those experts will be looking at what the next course of action is.
What would we even do if we found this submarine? And he danced around it. He just said we'd talk about it and when you get the experts involved. That just means guys, I think what we already know. Even if you found the vessel Titan, there's nothing we could have done about it. It's now Thursday morning. They presumed the usable air would have expired by now. They're out of air. The vessel is secured with 17 bolts. The hatch is secured with 17 bolts from the outside. So even if they're bobbing on the surface, the crew can't get out. So by now, they've run out of air. So rapidly becoming a recovery mission, even though from the start, I believe it was a recovery mission. Nobody could have gotten them out of there. You could have been down in an ROV waving at this sub, and there's nothing to do. They're 13,000 feet below the surface. We just don't have the capabilities to save anybody. That, I've heard people say, they might as well be on the moon, man. And that's totally the case. So the Coast Guard, they just there's nothing they could do. There's nothing they could have done. And that's not saying they did anything wrong. Actually, they did everything right. The Coast Guard might not be good at underwater rescue, but I'll tell you what they are good at. They're good at coordinating multiple agencies, assets, and nations to respond for a collective goal. And I will tell you, that's what they did here. They utilize a model that California Fire, they created in the 80s called Integrated Command Systems. It's a framework where all agencies speak the same language and coordinate assets and personnel to respond to mass events. And they all speak the same language, so they all know what they're talking about. And the Coast Guard, they nailed it, man. They set up a unified command. You hear Jamie, Captain Frederick, mention that a lot. They set up a unified command and operate from there and coordinate the response that way. Unfortunately, this really was not a rescue mission. There was nothing the Coast Guard could do. What they did do was well done. And as I make this, there is a press brief scheduled for 1500 today because there's been some debris found. They found some debris. I'm going to speculate just for a second. I believe that the Titan, 1 hour and 45 minutes into its descent, developed a leak and probably imploded instantaneously. I bet you nobody even knew about it. It was instantaneous. That thing just crushed on itself. I know I'm just speculating, but if there's debris found, that means it imploded, which is really sad for everybody on board and everybody involved. But I wanted to say, like, my hearts go out to them. What a terrible way to go, even though it was instantaneous. I think as this unfolds, we're gonna realize this was amateur hour, man. Like, the submersible Titan is controlled by a 10-year-old video game joystick. How was this ever allowed to happen? The Stockton Rush is quoted as saying he doesn't want 50-year-old white men with military experience piloting the sub. He prefers enthusiasm over experience. I think experience runs the world, man. I think that's kind of foolish. As this unfolds, we're gonna keep watching, you know. And unfortunately, it's rapidly transitioning to a recovery mission and not a rescue. So that's kind of a bummer, but I think it was pretty instantaneous. I think it was always a recovery mission. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Follow along, Hobby Camper. Thanks for watching. Like, thoughts go out to the families of the missing and to the first responders. I'll see you out there.